Well, welcome back, everyone. This is Frank DiMora here again at the End Times Research Ministry, bringing you the current news. And I want to focus right now on, again, the birds, fish, and animals that are dying as we see in the scriptures. But before I get to that news, I wanted to put up my website so that you have the chance to go over there, check out the news, and also click the link and you can get my documentary, The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth, today for free. Now, we've been discussing the birds, the fish, and the animals dying. Hosea gives us warnings about these last days, where he tells us the beasts of the field, the fowls of heaven, and the fish of the sea are going to be taken away. So when we're looking out at the news and we're seeing these mass numbers of either the fish, the birds, and animals dying, that should raise an alarm that something major is taking place in the ecosystem. And we're seeing more and more reports about this almost now on a daily basis. And also, this isn't the only prophecy that we get warning of. When we go in the book of Revelation, we see the prophecy there in Revelation 16:3, where the Lord showed us the second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it turned into blood like that of a dead man, and every living thing in the sea died. So between Hosea telling us that all of these things are going to be taken away, and Jesus showing us in the tribulation that everything is going to die, we know that we're in for some really bad times during the tribulation period. We're already into the birth pangs, showing us that the ecosystem is in fact being affected in a big way. So let's go over to the news. There's been 3 other reports since I made a report yesterday. Now, if you missed the report yesterday in Peru, we talked about the turtles and the sea lions that were dying off in Hermosa Beach. And today, to begin with, there is another report that I'm going to bring to your attention. And that report comes from Italy, October the 12th of 2015. These are the reports that I didn't report on yesterday. And as you can see from the drop downs, 40 dead sea turtles in just 3 days. So we saw them in Peru, now we see them turning up in Italy. And as the warm water continues, it's going to have an effect on the living creatures in the water. So the cause of the deaths of these turtles in Italy, unknown. So I'll move in again October the 13th in Nigeria this time. And once again, we hear reports of the avian flu found in Nigeria's Jigawa region. Now, when you go over and you click the link and you read the entire report, you're going to find out that there were 1,000 deaths and 3,000 birds were destroyed as a result of the outbreak. The following news came October the 13th from Alaska Public Media.
Scientists continue to see large numbers of dead or sick sea otters turning up in the Kachemak Bay region. Officials with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service say the agency has received about 200 reports of sick or dead otters over the past few months. KBBI's Daisha Eaton has more.
It's Friday night, and Mark Weber with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Homer has already had 2 calls for sick sea otters.
Well, I just was out on the spit having dinner with my family, and a call came in as I was coming into the station of 2 otters ashore on Mariner this evening.
Weber's part of a group trained to respond to sick and injured marine mammals. He's Deputy Refuge Manager for the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge, which runs the Alaska Islands and Ocean Visitors Center in Homer.
And so I was able to get to one of them down below the rock wall along the Spit Road, and that individual was in very bad shape. It is a somewhat depleted condition, but demonstrating something we've also seen a little bit of, which is kind of a set of neurological symptoms where it was twitching.
Weber and trained volunteers try to keep people away from sick otters and get a vet to euthanize them when necessary.
We're finding otters all over the Homer area. They're found from outer Bishop's Beach all the way around the Spit on both sides and along the shores of Mud Bay, so pretty widespread.
Otters play an important role in their habitat, Weber notes. They're positioned at the top of the food web, so when something's going wrong with them, something is likely affecting the entire ecosystem. Otters were nearly hunted to extinction during the fur trade of the 17 and 1800s and suffered again after the Exxon Valdez oil spill. The sea otters in Kachemak Bay are part of a population that stretches from Cook Inlet to Prince William Sound. In the 70s, the Marine Mammal Protection Act safeguarded otter populations. Otters remain protected. At last count, the Kachemak Bay otter population was around 5,900. Carrie Gertz is a veterinarian with the Alaska Sea Life Center in Seward. She's been examining sick otters.
This summer started off fairly typical with a couple of otter carcasses being found, a few otter carcasses being found every week. However, as the summer went on into August and September, we were getting up over 20 carcasses or moribund animals each week. And it's in those animals that we've seen some different presentations.
She says they've been tracking a streptococcus illness in Kachemak Bay area otters for some time, and those otters usually appear sickly and emaciated. But the otters that have died since August seem different.
Most recently, what we've seen more of is animals in a healthier condition that seem to have been taking care of themselves well, but have died acutely. And that seems to be, that has become more common in the ones that we've been seeing in the last couple of months.
Weber with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Homer says he's responded to around 50 calls for dead and dying otters over the past couple of months, and what he's seeing seems different than what he's seen in the past.
Something is hitting them harder and faster than, in addition to the disease that we're familiar with seeing, something else seems to be involved. This is just speculation. We don't have any evidence of that yet, but that's what we're seeing on the beach.
Officials with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Alaska Sea Life Center say they're waiting for lab tests to get back in the next few weeks.
Before I get into the next section of the news, I want to make sure that anybody that's new who came to my YouTube channel, that they would understand that they can get this book, the prophecy book that I wrote, for free by going over to that website that you see on the drop down. It is loaded with all the information about the birds, the fish, and the animals. All the links are there for you. You can click those links. A lot of them have videos that you'll be able to watch from the news, and it really is an eye-opener when you see all the documentation about the birds, fish, and animals that are dying off. I'm going to turn my attention back to the Psalm 83 war. For those of you who are new to prophecy and don't know anything about it, just understand this. When you take a look at the photo that I put up on the screen for you, you'll see the list of names that everybody that God has spoken to us about in His Word in this Psalm 83. These are the nations that God told us we're going to attack Israel. He tells us in verse 1 all the way through verse 5 who these people are and what their motives are. You take a look at verse 4, for example. They have said, "Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance." And verse 5 is very important. "For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee." So all of these nations that God has listed, and I just put them from 1 to 10. He doesn't list them like that, but I put it in there to make it very, very simple. The names on the left, Old Testament names, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see the modern-day names of who these people are. So the reason why I gave you all this information is because one thing is leading to another. We know that the war is coming, and we do know why the war is taking place, why Israel is being targeted in these last days. And much of it has to do with what's going on behind this East Gate. As you go through the East Gate and you enter in East Jerusalem, you'll see that there is definitely signs that we are approaching prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled yet. One of those prophecies is the Psalm 83 war. Now, as you go in to the East Gate, which, by the way, is sealed up, and nobody's going to go through that East Gate until Jesus Christ walks through that East Gate first. That's part of prophecy. But right now, what we're seeing as you enter into the city, this old city of Jerusalem, we see the prophet Zechariah's words coming to pass. And he specifically tells us in Zechariah 12, verses 2 and 3, Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all people round about. And when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem, and in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone. Our generation can definitely say Jerusalem has become a burdensome stone. Most of the politicians around the world are trying to figure out how they can make peace between the Arabs and Israel because of what's taking place in Jerusalem, and specifically East Jerusalem. So let's go on. It says, For all people, all that burden themselves with it, shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth are gathered together against it. So Jerusalem, this very special place, East Jerusalem, where the Temple Mount is, and as you can see right here, I took a picture off the net where we have Jews that have gone up to the Temple Mount. This is the place where the first and the second temples used to stand. Right now you see the Dome of the Rock. This is the Muslim third holy site in the world, and there's been a lot of friction in this area. Now, over the last 2 years, there's been more Jews making their way up to this area right here, this Temple Mount area. And because of this, there's been a lot of rioting, a lot of conflicts over this, and we know from what Zechariah tells us and what we see from Psalm 83, that these issues are colliding and there will be war. Now, I'm telling you, almost every single day, please watch what's going on in Jerusalem, because I believe that this is how this next war is going to ignite over this ownership. Can the Jews go up and pray? Can they finally have full access? We know the bottom line is this. If Jesus showed us that there was going to be a third temple, which he does in the scriptures, then you know that however it takes place, the Jews are going to be able to go up to the Temple Mount area and to do whatever they want to do. Pray, start their worships all over again, start their sacrifices. This thought drives the Muslims crazy. And not only does it drive them crazy, it drives them to do terrorist activities, and that's what we're seeing. So let me go to the news right now and show you what's happening right now over in Israel over the burdensome stone East Jerusalem. So this article, October the 14th, from the Times of Israel, Israel deploys hundreds of soldiers in Jerusalem. Of course, they show you a picture of some of the soldiers that are deployed, and of course this was back in April 21st of 2014. So the article says 6 companies of the Israeli soldiers were mobilized in Jerusalem Wednesday as the IDF joined efforts to secure the city following an escalation in the violence there. The move is part of a slew of measures passed by the Security Cabinet overnight Tuesday, aiming to prevent further terror attacks after the deadliest day so far in the current wave of unrest. Now, this one paragraph right here is very important, because any time that the IDF, and of course if you are new and you don't know what the IDF stands for, that's Israeli Defense Force. Anytime they put restrictions on this holy site for the Muslims take it as the Israelis are trying to take away our religious freedom on that Temple Mount. And when they do this, it just makes the situation even worse. And that's what we're seeing in Israel, specifically East Jerusalem right now. It says Tuesday saw 4 terror attacks, 2 of which in Jerusalem left 3 Israelis dead. All told, over 30 were injured. In accordance with the cabinet's decision last night, as of this morning, 300 IDF soldiers have already begun spreading out to provide additional security under police command, an Israeli police spokesman said in a statement Wednesday morning. Police also began setting up checkpoints at the exits of Palestinian villages and neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. where most of the recent attacks have come from, a police spokeswoman said. Those police actions are intended to return security and order to all the country's residents, the police said. The Security Cabinet also voted to ramp up security arrangements on Jerusalem's public transport, where the IDF will bolster security until the Transportation Ministry enlists additional guards. Soldiers will be stationed at bus and light rail stops, as well as on buses and trains across the city. And the reason why they're doing this is because the Palestinians, these Muslims, are ratcheting up their attacks, their assaults on the Israeli citizens. And mind you, it all goes back to the Temple Mount area. The IDF units will reinforce the Israeli police in cities and along roads and will deploy along the security fence in the immediate term, a statement from the Prime Minister's office said, in an effort to prevent terror attacks emanating from East Jerusalem. All 5 of Tuesday's attackers hailed from Arab neighborhoods there. The Security Cabinet also voted to allow a lockdown on several Arab neighborhoods. Now that's where I'm going to stop, because I just want to drive the point home, as I have been. Watch what's going on in East Jerusalem. Zechariah pinpointed Jerusalem. Pinpointed the fact that Jerusalem would be a burdensome stone. So everything that the prophet has told us about the future is here now. It's not a coincidence. You know, there's not a day that just about goes by where we don't hear something about this mosque area where the Dome of the Rock is, Al-Aqsa Mosque. Almost every single day now we're hearing some news about what's going on in relation to this holy site there at the Temple Mount and where the mosque is, this Al-Aqsa Mosque. And today is not unusual. The news from ynetnews.com, October the 14th, gives us some information about one of their Islamic movement leaders who have called for hatred and attacks against the Jews. I'm going to play the video that the news agency has given us.
The head of the northern branch of the Islamic movement in Israel was defiant on Wednesday morning when he arrived at a Jerusalem court in the wake of his conviction for incitement to violence and racism. In spirit and blood, we will defend Al-Aqsa Mosque, Rahid Salah, a high-profile Israeli Arab cleric and stringent critic of the Jewish state, declared. Salah arrived at a hearing at the Jerusalem District Court, accompanied by several Arab MKs, including Joint List leader Ayman Oda, Aman Tibi, and Hanin Zoabi, as well as former MK Mohammed Baraka. In the sermon, Salah called for an Islamic intifada, saying, "We never allowed ourselves to knead the bread of the fast-breaking meal in the month of blessed Ramadan with the blood of the children."
So once again, intifada, for those of you who don't know, this is an uprising against the nation of Israel to kill off the Jews. That's what he is talking about. That's what they arrested him for. Here's another issue that is also in prophecy, and you'll see this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 3 and 4, where Paul talks to us about this call for peace and safety. Listen to what he says. "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as the thief." What we know is, when Israel is calling for peace and safety, this sudden destruction is going to come. And how is this sudden destruction going to come? Do we have any answers to that? Well, we certainly do, because as I pointed out from the Psalm 83 prophecy, the Lord tells us that the Arabs that surround Israel, those bordering nations right up against Israel, are going to come together as a confederacy to try to take out Israel once and for all. So, when you hear the call for peace and safety, your attention should be that much more heightened. Now, 17 hours ago, the Yahoo News came out with some information about what I'm talking about. Look at the headline: "Kerry to visit Mideast in bid to calm Palestinian and Israeli tensions." U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said on Tuesday he plans to travel to the Middle East to try to calm violence between the Palestinians and the Israelis and move the situation away from this precipice. The trip would mark Kerry's most direct talks to broker peace between the two sides since talks led by the United States failed last year. Now, for forever I've been telling the people, there's not going to be any peace before there is some type of major conflict. There has to be a conflict. That's what we see in the scriptures. Sudden destruction. That doesn't mean there's going to be peace. That means there's going to be what? What brings on sudden destruction? It's war. And the only war that we know of, or wars that we know of, are the Psalm 83 war and the Ezekiel war. Neither one have been fulfilled yet. So when they're calling for peace and safety, that's the time, as I said, heighten your antennas, if you will, and look into the Middle East, because we know war is coming. This article goes on to say, I will go there soon at some point appropriately and try to work to re-engage and see if we can't move that away from this precipice. Kerry told an audience at an event sponsored by the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. At least 7 Israelis and 29 Palestinians, including 10 alleged attackers, have died in the violence. Now, you want to take a poll? Everybody's taking polls. How many people out there believe that Kerry is going to bring peace to the region? Well, it's definitely admirable that Kerry is going over to the Middle East. The Lord said, blessed are the peacemakers. But we do know from the prophets' writings that there cannot be peace in the Middle East. There's going to be war before there's any type of peace whatsoever. And we do know that also in the scriptures, for example, in the book of Daniel, where he talks about the Antichrist and this temple that's going to be rebuilt and the man of sins going into the temple, that the Antichrist will be the one who seems like he's going to be bringing peace on this earth, peace to Jerusalem. And we do know that because we see the third temple is going to be standing and the Antichrist will be going into that third temple, so there has to be some kind of peace. But before that happens, there has to be a war to bring out the sounds of, let's sign a covenant, a peace covenant that the Antichrist will confirm. So once again, in closing, keep your eyes on Israel, keep your eyes on East Jerusalem, and that holy site that has so much tension around it. This is Frank DiMora. God bless.